Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of the Daily Friends Show. I am your host, Nicholas Lorimer, and today I'm joined by Gerbrandt van Heerden. Gerry, how are you doing?
Hi, Nick. It's good to be back on the show. It's good to see you guys.
Good to have you back with us. And we also have Mr. Terence Corrigan. Terence, how are you doing, sir?
Hi, Nick. How are you?
I'm not too bad. A little bit warm, but that's, a welcome change after what were some very bitter cold days this year.
Right.
Looking forward to the rain that hopefully this warmth will bring. Although I know there's lots of parts of the country that have had more than enough rain to last a lifetime right now. So I hope the rain is just on us in Gauteng. But anyway, let's get into the news of today. And the first story we're going to talk about today is one of those stories of municipal mismanagement, which it's the kind of thing where if you don't laugh, you'll cry, because it's just sort of so ridiculous. So it has emerged that apparently the city of Johannesburg, which has recently been making extremely rough, tough efforts to collect as much outstanding municipal debt as possible. There's been many, many stories in the media about the municipality going around cutting off people who haven't paid, cutting off businesses. There was even a threat to cut off Joburg's two biggest, second and third most important hospitals. So this has been really in the news, but it turns out that the guys who are hired to do all of this, cutting off and debt collecting, haven't themselves been paid. In fact, they're owed a significant amount of money. Despite collecting R500 million for the municipality, the city of Joburg has told its debt collectors that it cannot pay them for the work they have done yet. 93 contracted companies have not been paid in 6 months, and this has in fact led to layoffs in some of these companies. And the city is falling below its goal of how much revenue it wants to collect. It's only collected 75% of the revenue. It's aiming for 91% to be collected. And we've seen all sorts of cutoffs of everything from nursing homes to individuals all over the place. And this is also going alongside higher valuations and rates, which have been raised in the city of Johannesburg. And yet, at the same time, there is shortages of water in large parts of the city. Lots of Johannesburg, due to leaks, stolen water, and other problems with the infrastructure, have been without water for, in some cases, more than a month. So, Terence, let me start with you. The situation is so dire, and what makes it kind of more head-scratching is that Dara Morero, the MMC of Finance in the city of Johannesburg, who is a member of the ANC, said that the reason the debt collectors haven't been paid in such a long time is because of, quote, a process of validation which had to happen first. However, he promised that they would be paid 37 million rand that they were owed by next Friday. What do you make of all this?
What does he mean? I mean, who are they validating? They're validating that the money is owed? Are they validating that these guys are who they are? No, look, this as they say in Texas, that dog don't hunt. No, look, I think this is just the latest in a long, sad, tragic, heart-rending tale of municipal mismanagement that goes back decades. In the 1990s, you could argue with some justification that there's a completely new system being established, and we're going to struggle with that a bit. Right now, it's kind of like the clowns took over the circus, essentially. I don't know. I don't have a better way to say it. The hub of South Africa's economy shouldn't have an issue like this. That council is on the verge of bankruptcy, and everything is just kind of like breaking down. What you gonna do?
What are you going to do indeed? Well, apparently the city of Joburg's response, as I mentioned, was to be very aggressive in cutting off and trying to collect revenue. And yet, well, can I just also make a point on that, which is that many people point to the unpaid debts in Soweto. But actually, that's not the city of Johannesburg's problem, because Soweto is serviced directly by Eskom for its electricity needs. So the city of Joburg is not actually dealing with that issue. And 75% revenue collection is, not super, super low. But what is interesting is a lot of the places that are outstanding. And it turns out, due to some Daily Maverick reporting, that in fact, SOEs and government departments owe a significant amount of money to the city of Johannesburg for water alone. The Gauteng Department of Health owes 340 million rand. Departments of Housing and Education also owe how many hundreds of millions of rands. The passenger rail agency PRASA owes 72 million rand, and Transnet owes 66 million rand.
Your developmental state at work.
Indeed, these places don't seem to be being cut off. Instead, it's ordinary citizens that are feeling the brunt of the deck.
That is a point. That is a point just to be made, that non-payment isn't always about delinquent householders. It's been a source of cheap credit for a lot of companies, and evidently for a lot of government departments. But once again, for a state that bills itself as the answer to our developmental challenges, this is a poor show.
Indeed. Gerbrandt, what do you make of all this? It really does feel. I know that you relatively recently moved out of Johannesburg, not that long ago, to the Western Cape. And I don't know, but I suspect part of the reason was that you weren't entirely happy with the situation in Johannesburg. And it is very much feels like the case that, especially for, I would say the last 2 years or so, Johannesburg's quality of services and management seems to have deteriorated rapidly. And there are more and more stories every day which suggest that the city's infrastructure is in a state of kind of accelerating collapse. What do you make of all this?
Yeah, I was actually pondering that question quite recently, because I still do travel back to Joburg on a regular basis. And every time I enter the city, I love the city. I love Johannesburg, but the city looks sick. It looks like, it's just the health of the city has just gone backwards significantly. But I asked myself, is it because when I stayed in Joburg, things were already bad like that and I was just completely used to it? And when I moved to Cape Town, I suddenly now recognize the differences, or has things just deteriorated significantly in the last 2 years? But I also want to go back to an argument or a statement that Terence made, I think earlier this year or last year. Johannesburg doesn't have mountains or vineyards or oceans, but people were still drawn to Johannesburg because it was the economic hub. You had the mining companies, the big corporates stationed in Sandton. So that was a big draw card. But in this new era where the mines have gone dry in Gauteng, and where you have this working from home phenomenon that has taken place, and that has given more skilled people choice to still work for a Joburg company, but from KwaZulu-Natal or from the Western Cape. In this new era, in order for Joburg to still keep on developing and remain relevant and still remain the economic hub of the country, Terence suggested that Joburg should basically emulate what a city like Dubai has done. Dubai doesn't have lots of resources or natural beauty, but it has become this, it's built like mega malls and like super theme parks, and it's got the world's latest technology. And that is how Dubai still, has positioned itself as one of the main global cities in the world, even though from the start it didn't have a lot to go for. So, and I think that's the same approach that Johannesburg should also take. But how can you take that approach when the local government and the national government is running Joburg to the ground? Where, I mean, how do you attract investors? How do you attract new business people with new ideas if your city doesn't have water, it doesn't have lights, it doesn't have roads to drive on? So I think with the latest census as well, Census 2022, I saw an article in the Daily Maverick where they said that it seems like Joburg is stagnating. The city isn't growing that fast anymore in terms of its population, because it's losing its shine in every way. And that's a huge problem for Joburg. I mean, if you can't get the basics right, then Joburg's going to become our version of Detroit, a forgotten mining industry city.
Or we could even compare it to the way Kimberley looks these days, which was once actually one of the great cities of South Africa, and is now sort of an increasingly dusty, decrepit place. Just on that point you made about Joburg not growing as fast, I noticed that in the census data too, when looking at the Gauteng level. And while Gauteng is still receiving a huge influx of people, it's also having a lot of people leave. And I think that is what explains some of the slowness in growth. Terence, your thoughts?
Well, if they don't do something to answer that question, I remember a previous show we discussed this idea of putting up a big mega monument because it's going to encourage tourism. And I suggested, how about a nice big elephant and paint it white? It's just there's something profoundly unserious about all of this. We'll spend the next 3 years designing the new improved spatial development plan with our big mega monument. I don't know.
I think there is a place for
commerce. That's what you want.
Exactly. I think there is a big place for what Gerbrandt described there in kind of the sort of Dubai type tourism. Unlike Dubai, we have tolerable weather that isn't awful. So that's an advantage. And go to a place like Sandton City and you will see foreigners, particularly from Africa, the sort of Africa's elites from Nigeria, from Kenya, from all over the place, coming here to shop for expensive brands and luxury goods and stuff. And, it's not the biggest market in the world, but it's definitely one that Joburg could take more of an advantage of if some of the basics worked properly. If you could build a new development without having to pay bribes, without having to wait ages for regulatory approval, and being able to know that firstly your customers would be sort of safe from crime, and at the very least able to get water when they want it, because right now it's really just water is something that's much harder for in a water scarce country like us to replace. You can get a generator, you can get solar panels, you can get all sorts of things if you're a company or a wealthier person, or you have a larger business. But water, things start to get a bit more dicey.
Water's a big
no, exactly. Okay, let us move on to our next story, and this one is, I think, very closely related to the first story. And this is following on from our episode we did yesterday on the Daily Friend Wrap. We talked about the national results from a Brenthurst Group poll, a demographically representative sample, 1,500 people, which found that the ANC's support nationally, compared to their previous polls, had dropped from 48% to 41%. But today we're going to focus on the provincial results in that same survey, which found that the ANC's vote share is something like, currently according to their poll, 37% in Gauteng, and in KZN it's down to 32%, which is absolutely devastating if that's true. Now, I have some suspicions. I think that KZN has been a little bit difficult to poll in the past. I know, for example, the IFP is often slightly underpolled. In fact, that may suggest the ANC is going to do worse here, but be that as it may, the other interesting fact that we did mention yesterday is that Cyril Ramaphosa's approval rating, which once was in the sort of mid-60s, has fallen now to 42%. He's still the most popular politician in the country, but not by that much anymore. In fact, pretty much all of our politicians are rather unpopular. Terence, let me start with you again. What do you make of this poll? Do you buy its results? Do you think the ANC is in trouble in Gauteng and KZN?
I think the first thing to note is that, and this is something that seems to elude a lot of commentators, a poll is not a prediction. It is a snapshot of people's opinions on a kind of theoretical level as things stand at the moment. I think that the ANC has a certain advantage of inertia and incumbency that will serve it fairly well on election day when an election is actually held. For me, the interesting thing, though, is this, that we see if the ANC does sort of fall to the levels that it's talking about there, which, as I say, I don't think is a likely scenario, and they still want to make a go of remaining in government. If we assume that the various moonshot pact groups are definitively out, which I think is also something that remains to be seen, the only one they can really go with is the EFF. So, could this be your doomsday coalition? Are they in trouble in KwaZulu-Natal and Gauteng? Yes. I remember actually a couple of years ago speaking to a big name academic who I won't name here, and I said, mark my words, Gauteng will be the next ninepin to fall. I think that is probably going to happen in the next election. KwaZulu-Natal has, in a way, has shown a bit of, democratic variability. Although its politics, let's just say, I am thankful KwaZulu-Natal's politics kind of remains in KwaZulu-Natal for the most part, because it's not an attractive thing.
Just on your point about the ANC and EFF perhaps going into coalition with one another, these polls have been kind of all over the place, but generally speaking, I would say most of the polls that have come out about the national share of the ANC vote, and also what we've seen from KZN and such, not just from the Brentos Foundation, but also from our former boss, Frans Cronje's institution, the Social Research Foundation, have shown the ANC kind of somewhere in the 40s nationally and somewhere in the high 30s in these other provinces. Yeah. And, the EFF is going to get somewhere between 10 and 20%, probably closer to 10, but we don't know, somewhere in that range. And that means that they will probably be a viable coalition partner. But, this story, let me bring up this story, Gerry. Malema was speaking to supporters outside a courtroom yesterday. He was trying to get his the improper gun usage charges against him dropped. But he gave a talk, and this is very clearly going to be the cornerstone of the EFF's campaign, which interestingly is focused on branding the EFF as an anti-corruption party, which when one thinks of the VBS scandal is a little bit silly. But anyway, Malema said that if you want to see Cyril Ramaphosa behind bars for the Phala Phala scandal, you must vote the EFF into government. Malema said that the first thing the EFF government will do is go to once they are in the union buildings, is arrest Ramaphosa for Phala Phala. He said, if you want Ramaphosa to account for the Phala Phala scandal, vote EFF. Our government is going to arrest him when we take government after winning the 2024 elections. We will make him account as soon as we arrive at the union buildings. Malema also claimed to be drawing up a list of ministers for his cabinet in waiting. Now, if the EFF is going to go into coalition with the ANC, this is going to be a little bit awkward to finesse rhetorically. I don't know, Gerry, what do you make of all this?
Yeah, I don't know exactly where to begin with all of that. But I will say, yes, I agree with you. It will be a very awkward situation when Malema says we're this anti-corruption party, we're going to arrest Ramaphosa, and then with the 2024 elections, it turns out the EFF and the ANC have to get into the same bed. But I think what we've seen in the last few years as well is that at least half of what EFF leader Malema says, he'll say one thing today and the complete opposite tomorrow. So take it with a pinch of salt. I think I think it's also a strange country that we're living in. If you are a taxpayer, middle class, decent person, minding your own business, living in Parktown North, you want the ANC to fall below 50%, but not too much, because otherwise you'll get the doomsday, coalition pact between the ANC and the EFF. I do think that I personally think that the ANC will not drop below 50%, because, I'll refer to what one of my other colleagues have said, is that the ANC's support base, even despite permanent load shedding, an increasing water shedding crisis, decrepit service delivery, the ANC's support base remains sticky, especially in rural provinces, rural areas. I mean, Buffalo City and Mangaung are the two cities where the ANC still gets above 50% in the municipal elections. So if the ANC does drop below 50%, I do think it'll be just beneath that threshold, which will require the ANC to go into a coalition with like your smaller 1%, 2% political parties.
Someone like the AIT.
Yeah, but I think we should always be on our guard of the possibility of an ANC-EFF coalition and what that might mean for South Africa. It's a very, very uncertain political time era that we're about to enter in this country.
So, Terence, on the show we've talked about, what are the problems and possibilities of an ANC-EFF coalition, a DA-ANC coalition. We've even mentioned a couple of times an IFP-ANC coalition. These are all possibilities if the ANC drops significantly below 50%. But I have another scenario which I would like your thoughts on, and this is the idea that the ANC just simply won't be able to get any kind of reliable coalition partner. You can make a case for why the EFF won't want to go into coalition with them, why the DA won't want to go into coalition with them, and why the IFP won't want to go into coalition with them. And if they can't scrape together enough of the smaller parties to make a coalition work, you could see a scenario where, the DA says, okay, we'll let Ramaphosa be elected president, but only if you make this sort of concession in Parliament. And then you could have a situation where the ANC is effectively crippled legislatively because it will have to either suck up to the DA or the EFF in order to pass any single piece of legislation. That would leave us with a very unstable government, but one in which the ANC is, while technically sort of in charge, doesn't really dominate the legislature anymore. That would make Parliament the center of our politics, I think, in a very real way. Firstly, do you think there's any possibility of a scenario like that occurring? And secondly, what are your thoughts on how that would shake out?
Well, someone once said in the mid-90s, strange things happen in this new South Africa. No, I think that's an imminent possibility. Maybe not this election, maybe the election later. Look, you must remember amongst the three largest parties, there's an enormous degree of tension and polarization. And among smaller parties, there's lots of people, trying to play their own little games with their own either niche interests or, simply looking for the best option for patronage. So I could foresee a situation where things are just paralyzed, and while that may, in a sense, stop the worst impulses that have been on display from being openly pursued, the overall downward drift would continue, if not accelerate, because there simply wouldn't be, even the reasonable certainty of bad, of a sort of bad policy that you could orient yourself around. So yeah, I think South Africa's salvation is going to lie in eventually getting a government with a reasonably strong electoral mandate that can actually start to address that recognizes the problems exist, and then can start to put some of them right. Now, there's probably a generational project, so don't expect anything overnight. But no, yeah, perhaps we are just looking at the kind of untamed wilderness for the next little while.
No, that's very possible. Anyway, something to consider. And there's still a lot of election, as you pointed out, Terence. This is not a prediction. This is very much a snapshot of the way things are currently, and who knows how the election campaign is going to shake out. There's still a lot of stuff to come. And if one of the parties, if the DA, the EFF, the ANC, any of them stumble in their election campaign, we could see a very different result when the votes are cast. All right, very briefly, let's just talk about the new public protector. So Busisizwe Mkhwebane has been thrown out as public protector, and she's been replaced by Advocate Kholeka Gcaleka, who was the deputy public protector, and she has been acting public protector whilst Mkhwebane was suspended. There was a little bit of drama in Parliament when the DA's Glynis Breitenbach objected to the fact that, according to parliamentary rules, you are not allowed to criticize a member of a Chapter 9 institution, like the public protector. However, Glynis Breitenbach said that this made the process unfair because there was only one candidate who was a member, who has been considered for the job of public protector, who was already a member of a Chapter 9 institution, and that is the one who won the vote. Things were a bit complicated. The DA, I think, ended up walking out of Parliament. I think the EFF may have joined them. In the end, the ANC needed 60% of Parliament to get the thing across, and it looks like, I think, they were joined by a couple of the small parties and the IFP in order to get their candidate appointed public protector. Terence, what do you make of this?
Yeah, I think that there's ironies within ironies here. First of all, the Chapter 9 institutions are technically known as state institutions supporting constitutional democracy. Now, there were some issues with their mandates at the beginning, but this was supposed to reassure everyone that there'd be a check on the abuse of power. And the public protector is an interesting one, because according to incumbent, it's either been a fairly robust safeguard of public interest. So I think if Thuli Madonsela, but I think also Selby Bakwa, the first one. Others less so. If you think about Lawrence Mshwana and the Petro SA deal, where he decided, he can't possibly look at funneling money, because once it stops belonging to the government, then it's not public money anymore. I think Richard Callan said something like, "I'd give him an F for this dross and tell him to do it again." I think that, but I think after Thuli Madonsela, the implications of having somebody who is quite a harakhat, particularly now that the full implications of the ANC's the ANC's own state capture drive, the one they started in 1997 with code redeployment, have come to fruition, they are going to be suspicious of roping in someone with too much independence and let's say harakhatedness. So yeah, what does it mean? We'll have to wait and see.
Ferry, any final thoughts just before we close up?
Nothing to add, but it just the public protector saga just sounds like a mess. Don't really follow that, but it sounds like a mess.
I think that's definitely going to be the case. I'm not expecting much good out of that offer soon, but maybe our new public protector will prove me wrong. I hope I am wrong. Anyway, that's all the time we have for today. Thank you very much for watching. We will see you on Monday with the Daily Friend Show. Cheers, everyone.